The moment my phone buzzed with a $780,000 0 cents loan alert, I didn't panic, not immediately. I thought it was a mistake, a glitch. But when I saw the address listed in the paperwork, my hands went ice cold. That was Vanessa's dream neighborhood, the same place she had been obsessing over for months. I'm Olivia Carter, and until last week, I thought I knew the worst thing my sister was capable of. Turns out I was wrong, so very wrong. I should have known when she hugged me at my birthday dinner, whispering, "Things are finally falling into place." I thought she meant something sweet, maybe a job, maybe a baby on the way. I didn't expect it to be my name on her mortgage. Now she's thrown a lavish housewarming party in a house I technically own, and I plan to surprise her in a way she'll never forget. Growing up, my sister Vanessa was the sun I orbited around. She was 3 years older, louder, more beautiful, the kind of girl who turned heads even at age 10. And me? I was the quiet one with smudged glasses, always holding a book, always looking up to her. In our childhood home in Portland, we shared bunk beds, secrets, and dreams of a future that, in my mind, always included her. Back then, I would have done anything for Vanessa, and often I did. When our parents went through a rough patch, I sold handmade bracelets at school to pitch in for groceries. Vanessa took the credit. When she forgot her homework, I slipped mine under her name. I even gave up a scholarship to a summer science program because she had a cheerleading camp and my parents couldn't afford both. But none of that felt like sacrifice, it felt like love. Vanessa had this magnetic pull. She could charm teachers into giving her extensions, charm my friends into choosing her side when we fought, charm her way out of any consequence. I saw it all and still adored her. In high school, she dated older boys, won popularity contests, and left trails of admirers in her wake. I admired her confidence, even when it veered into arrogance. She'd tousle my hair and say, "You'll get it one day, Liv. The world doesn't reward the quiet ones." When I graduated early from college, she didn't come to the ceremony. She had a spa weekend. When I landed my first finance internship, she joked, "So you're going to be boring and rich?" Still, I invited her to every milestone. When our dad got sick, I moved back home for 6 months to help. Vanessa visited twice. But when people asked, she told them she'd been holding the family together. I said nothing because I thought that's what loyalty meant. The last time I felt truly close to Vanessa was the night before my big promotion at the firm. She brought over sushi and wine, gave me a manicure, and told me she was proud of me. "You've always been the smart one," she said, eyes unusually sincere. "Maybe being boring pays off." It was the kindest thing she'd said to me in years. Looking back now, I wonder if she was already planning it, already looking for a way to turn my stability into her opportunity. But back then, all I saw was the sister I had loved my whole life, and I was willing to give her anything, including my trust. There were countless other moments. When Vanessa needed a car for her weekend trips, she borrowed mine, usually bringing it back with an empty tank. When her credit card maxed out during a Vegas trip, I wired her money. She promised to pay me back. She never did. But I justified everything. She was my sister. She had potential. She just needed time to figure things out. When she married Andrew, a smooth-talking real estate developer, I helped plan the wedding, paid for the floral deposit myself, gave a heartfelt speech about second chances and sisterhood, even though she'd barely involved me in the process. When the marriage collapsed 2 years later, I was the one driving across town at midnight to hold her as she cried. She always came to me after the storms she started. And still, I believed that deep down Vanessa loved me too, that the selfishness was temporary, that one day she'd see all I had done and be grateful. Because the truth is, I didn't just love her, I wanted to be loved by her. I wanted to matter. So when she lost her job again last year, something vague about a toxic manager, I offered her my guest room. She stayed for 3 weeks, used my toiletries, took over my living room with her phone calls and shopping hauls. I came home one night to find her trying on my new blazer. I'll relax, Liv, she smirked. You weren't even wearing it. That moment should have told me something, but instead, I laughed because that's what I'd always done. Absorb the hit, pretend it didn't hurt, and call it love. Only now do I see the pattern, a lifetime of giving, of forgiving, of letting Vanessa color outside every line, and me, the ever-loyal sister cleaning up the mess. I didn't know then what was coming, but part of me wonders, maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't want to believe my own blood could betray me like that. At first, the signs were subtle, little things that could be dismissed as forgetfulness or personality quirks. Vanessa borrowed my sweaters without asking, forgot to return my books, and treated my apartment like a hotel whenever she needed a break from her problems. I told myself it didn't matter. I had more important things to focus on. Deadlines, clients, savings goals. But over time, the small things added up. She once used my Amazon Prime account to order over $500, 0 cents worth of electronics, all delivered to her address. When I confronted her, she gasped dramatically, "Oh, Liv, I thought I was still logged into mine. Honest mistake." She didn't offer to pay me back until I brought it up twice. Then she sent me a Venmo for $50, 0 cents, just to show I care, the note read. When I was swamped with a big client presentation, she showed up at my apartment unannounced, dragging 2 suitcases and a new puppy. "I just need a few nights. I'll be gone before Monday." She stayed for 9, left fur everywhere, never said thank you. Then came the favors that were less about asking and more about expecting. "Liv, you're great with forms. Can you just fill out my taxes this year? Or you work at a bank, kinda. Can you help me get pre-approved for a loan?" I always hesitated, always agreed, because saying no to Vanessa felt like inviting a storm. And every time I asked her for something, help picking up mom's medication, covering a brunch tab when I'd forgotten my wallet, she either forgot, flaked, or made a joke at my expense. "Classic Liv," she'd say, so organized until she's not. There was always a smile on her face, a lightness in her tone. But the digs were sharp, and they always landed. Even when I got promoted to senior financial advisor, a milestone I'd worked toward for nearly a decade, her response was lukewarm. "Wow, someone's climbing the ladder. Must be nice to be good with spreadsheets." Not a congratulations, not a toast, not a card. I started to notice how my friends tensed around her, how Ethan would go quiet when she visited. One evening after she left, he turned to me and said, "Why do you let her talk to you like that?" Didn't have an answer, not a real one. Because deep down, I had started to feel it too, that I was less when I was around her, that she expected me to give but never saw me. She laughed at my budgeting spreadsheets, rolled her eyes when I talked about home ownership, called me adorable when I showed her pictures of a condo I liked. "I mean, sure," she'd shrug. "If you're into basic starter homes." I began second-guessing myself. Was I being petty, oversensitive, holding grudges over harmless comments? But when Vanessa hosted a birthday dinner for herself and didn't invite me, then tagged me in the group photo captioned, "All the people who matter most," something inside me cracked. Called her out, text, "This hurt me. Why would you exclude me?" She replied, "Stop being dramatic. It was just a night out." I wanted to believe her, but something shifted, and a part of me, long buried under years of excuses, began to wake up. It got worse after she started talking about buying a house. "I just know my dream home is out there," she said one evening while sprawled on my couch, sipping the matcha I had made her. "Someplace with white columns, a pool, and a wraparound porch." I smiled politely. "That sounds lovely. I've been saving too, hoping to find a condo by next spring." She laughed. "A condo? That's so you, Liv. Sensible, safe, slightly dull." Ethan, sitting beside me, stiffened. I laughed it off. But the next day, she sent me a listing for a $1 million estate in Lakeside Oaks with the caption, "Manifesting this for myself." "How?" I texted back. "That's double your price range." She never answered. 2 weeks later, I noticed my bank statements acting odd. One of my tax documents had gone missing. Vanessa had stayed over again, claiming she needed some sister time. She'd borrowed my laptop, said hers was updating, left papers scattered on my desk, used my printer. Everything felt innocent until it didn't. The last straw came when I overheard her talking to a friend on speakerphone in the kitchen. "She's got amazing credit," Vanessa said, with a casual tone that chilled me. If I had that kind of score, I'd have a mansion by now. Her friend asked something I couldn't hear. She laughed. "Let's just say Liv wouldn't even know how to stop me." I froze, stood outside the kitchen paralyzed. Was she joking? Was I being paranoid? I never asked, I never confronted. But for the first time in my life, I started locking my office drawer. I changed my laptop password. And when I filed my tax return that year, I did it from a different computer, just in case. Because even if I wasn't ready to admit it out loud, a quiet voice inside me had begun to whisper, Vanessa might not just be careless. She might be dangerous. The betrayal revealed itself on an ordinary Tuesday morning, a day like any other, until my phone chimed with a notification from my bank. Your payment of $4,212.37 is due in 5 days. I blinked at the screen. What payment? I scrolled down to find the details. A mortgage, a property in Lakeside Oaks, loan amount $780,000, 0 cents. I felt my stomach drop. There had to be a mistake. I called the bank, was transferred to a specialist. After verifying my identity, the representative on the line, a calm, polished man named Brian, confirmed the worst. Yes, Ms. Carter, this mortgage was approved under your name about 6 weeks ago. We have all the standard documents, income verification, employment history, your digital signature. My what? I stammered. He offered to send me the PDF copies. I opened them. My name was there, my employer, my income, even a scanned image of my ID, the one that had mysteriously gone missing 3 months ago when Vanessa borrowed my purse for just a minute. I couldn't breathe. I pulled my credit report. There it was. The mortgage, 3 new credit cards, and nearly $50,000, 0 cents in balances, all tied to the same address. 1547 Crescent Hollow Drive. I typed it into Google Maps and instantly recognized the house. White columns, a red door, manicured lawn, Vanessa's dream home. I called her, straight to voicemail. Texted, no reply. Next, I called our mom. Has Vanessa mentioned buying a house lately? She hesitated. Well, yes, she and Andrew bought something recently. Didn't she tell you they're having a housewarming Saturday? Rip the phone. What's the address? She shuffled around before replying. 1547 Crescent Hollow Drive. Isn't it beautiful? Hung up and found a digital invitation in my spam folder titled Our Dream Come True with a gif of clinking champagne glasses. I couldn't believe it. She'd used my name, my credit, my life, and was throwing a party in the house she stole. That night, I didn't sleep. I filed a fraud report, froze my credit, called a lawyer friend, and started documenting every detail. I requested every file from the bank, flagged the accounts, and changed every password I had. But it wasn't until the next day, sitting across from the fraud specialist reviewing the signed documents, that it hit me fully. She used your information to get everything approved, Brian said. And from what we've uncovered, she didn't just guess your details. She had access. Of course she did. She'd grown up with me, slept across from me in our childhood room. She knew my passwords, my security questions, my habits. She'd been inside my apartment, my files, my computer. The final blow? The tech who serviced Vanessa's laptop a month ago remembered her asking how to edit PDFs and create realistic signatures. It wasn't identity theft by a stranger. It was a heist, masterminded by the person I trusted most. And while she posed in front of her marble fireplace for Instagram, I was left with a wrecked credit score, mounting debt, and the crushing realization that my sister had willingly burned our bond for a house she couldn't afford. She didn't just steal my identity, she stole my future. and something inside me shattered. I showed the documents to Ethan that night. His jaw tightened as he flipped through the papers. "She really did all this?" he asked, eyes scanning the forged signature. "She did," I whispered, "and she didn't think I'd find out." Ethan placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I can't let it slide." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll figure this out together." The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and legal consultations. I had to explain my situation to my company's compliance department in case anything appeared on background checks. I spoke with a fraud investigator from the bank, a man named Samuel, who took my case seriously. "This isn't just fraud," he said. "This is calculated deception, and it's prosecutable." I stared at the ceiling that night, barely blinking. The betrayal had settled into my bones, a dull, aching weight I carried with me everywhere. I kept thinking about all the times I'd covered for Vanessa, all the chances I gave her. I had forgiven her for flaking on me, for using my things, even for forgetting my birthday once. This wasn't forgetfulness, this was war. Saturday arrived too soon. I dressed in neutral colors and drove with Ethan to Crescent Hollow. The plan was to gather evidence, photos of the house, screenshots of purchases, and social media proof of her living there. We needed to show that she benefited from the fraud. Vanessa greeted guests with champagne. Her laugh echoed from the foyer. I stayed outside, parked around the corner. Then, when most guests had arrived, I walked up the front path. The door opened just as I raised my hand to knock. Vanessa froze. "Liv?" she asked, stunned. "What are you doing here?" I held up the file folder, thought I'd see the house I'm paying for. Her smile faded. "What are you talking about?" "Cut the act, Vanessa. I know everything." She looked past me, searching for someone, an escape route, a savior. She found neither. I stepped inside, past the towering floral arrangements, the catered trays, the perfect furniture, all funded by me. "You used me," I said, my voice shaking. "You stole my name, my credit. You ruined everything." Guests nearby fell silent. One woman slowly backed away toward the hallway. Vanessa's face contorted. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I was going to fix it. "Fix it? You forged federal documents?" "I just needed help." "You never asked," I yelled. "You just took." Her husband Andrew appeared, holding a glass of wine. "What's going on?" I turned to him. "Did you know this house was bought under my name?" His face paled. "What?" "She forged everything, my signature, my tax returns, even my ID. Ask your wife." The silence was heavy. Andrew turned to her. "Vanessa?" Her lip trembled. "It was only temporary. We just needed a boost until your next deal closed. I was going to switch the line." "You lied to me," he said, stepping back. I looked around the room at the stunned faces of their friends. "I didn't come here to make a scene," I said, voice steady. "I came to tell the truth. This house isn't hers, and the truth always comes due." Then I left. I walked out, leaving the echo of her shattered facade behind me. It was the last time I would ever see Vanessa the same way again. In the days after the confrontation, I became a shell of myself. My routine collapsed. I couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat without nausea twisting my stomach. I'd spent years carefully building my credit, budgeting every cent, protecting my future. And now, because of my sister's greed, it was all unraveling. I called the bank almost daily trying to sort out the damage. Every time I had to say identity theft out loud, my voice shook. I watched my credit score plummet like a stock crash. I cried in the shower, cried in the car, cried until there were no tears left. The worst part wasn't even the financial fallout. It was the betrayal, the humiliation. I kept seeing her face at the party, the way she tried to smile, to lie, even when the truth stood inches from her. How little I seemed to matter in that moment. I wasn't her sister. I was her resource. And I didn't know how to live with that truth. Ethan was my anchor through it all. He made tea I didn't drink, sat with me in silence, held me at night when the nightmares came. I told him, maybe I should just pay it off, let it go. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You're not the criminal, Liv, he said. You don't fix this by letting her walk away. But the thought of legal battles exhausted me. The idea of court dates, public records, headlines, it made me want to disappear. I met with a therapist at Ethan's urging. At first, all I could say was, my sister ruined my life. The therapist didn't interrupt. She just waited. Eventually, the words spilled out. The years of being second best, the constant taking, the eroded boundaries I never enforced. She listened, she nodded, and she asked, what do you believe you deserve? I didn't have an answer. For the first time, I realized that some part of me believed I deserved this, that I had allowed so much because I thought that was my role, the fixer, the forgiver, the one who held it all together. But slowly that belief began to crack. One night, I woke up from a dream, Vanessa laughing, holding a copy of my bank statement like a trophy, and I didn't cry. I got out of bed, opened my laptop, and made a spreadsheet. List of damages, contacts, evidence, next steps. It was the first time in weeks I felt in control. It wasn't vengeance I wanted. It was my life back. I began to withdraw from my family. I ignored my mother's voicemails, each one more strained than the last. She wanted to talk things through, but I couldn't stomach the idea of more excuses or gaslighting. My father tried once, a stiff text saying, we're all hurting here, let's not overreact. I didn't respond because, for once, I was finally reacting exactly as I should. At work, I handed off 2 major clients. My manager noticed, take what time you need, she said gently, but let us know how we can support you. I wasn't used to that, being supported. I'd always been the one doing the supporting. Some nights, I found myself scrolling through Vanessa's old Instagram posts, wondering how many other moments were built on lies. She had always painted a picture of a carefree, glamorous life, but now I saw the cracks. Captions that felt performative, smiles that looked too rehearsed. I deleted every photo we'd ever taken together from my phone, not out of hatred, but to make space, for breath, for clarity. Ethan, patient as ever, kept showing up. Some days we talked, some days we didn't, but his presence reminded me that I wasn't entirely alone, that some people loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. Then, one gray afternoon, I received a letter in the mail from the fraud department. Formal, clinical, but thorough. Attached was a detailed timeline of the fraudulent activity, including IP addresses, timestamps, device IDs, all linked to her. I stared at the pages for hours. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was criminal. I made a new spreadsheet, labeled every action I needed to take. I called the lawyer. I scheduled a meeting with the DA's office. I asked Ethan to go with me because I had finally decided I wasn't going to let Vanessa write the ending of my story. I would. The first step to reclaiming my life came not in a courtroom, but in a notary's office. With Ethan beside me, I filed the paperwork to initiate formal restitution proceedings. My attorney, a sharp and meticulous woman named Carla Ramirez, helped craft a civil claim demanding Vanessa transfer the property, admit to the fraud in writing, and relinquish any rights tied to the fraudulent accounts. Vanessa didn't respond right away, but a week later, her attorney, likely hired with borrowed money, reached out. Negotiations were tense. She refused to admit wrongdoing, then begged for more time. She claimed it was a misunderstanding, then tried to shift the blame. But Carla was prepared. We had evidence, documentation, witnesses. By the end of the second week, Vanessa broke. She agreed to the terms. She would vacate the house within 30 days, sign over the deed, and enter a structured repayment agreement to address remaining damages. If she failed, criminal charges would be filed. No further warnings. It isn't revenge, it was justice. The day she signed the documents, I didn't attend. I couldn't. Ethan went in my place, sat quietly as Vanessa scrawled her signature, face pale, hands trembling. I think she didn't say much. He told me afterward, but she looked small. The house was legally mine, but I didn't want it. The taxes, the upkeep, it wasn't worth it. So with Carla's help, I listed it. We found a buyer within a month. I took the proceeds, paid off the remaining fraudulent balances, and used the rest to start over. I also hired a forensic financial advisor to monitor my credit long term. Every account, every transaction, every inquiry, all tracked, all secure. I locked down my digital life, replaced every document, even changed my phone number. More than anything, I changed how I saw myself. I wasn't weak for being hurt. I wasn't foolish for trusting. I was resilient for surviving. Ethan proposed 6 months later during a quiet dinner at home. No flash, no fanfare, just love, just steadiness. I want to build something real with you, he said. Not stolen, not borrowed. I said yes. We moved into a modest apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, but everything ours. We picked out secondhand furniture, planted herbs on the windowsill, laughed over takeout cartons. It was honest. It was healing. My parents eventually reached out again. My mother apologized through tears. My father admitted they'd enabled Vanessa for too long. I didn't protect you the way I should have, he said, but I see you now. It meant more than I expected. Therapy helped too. I kept going, kept unpacking the years of patterns, the quiet ways I'd bent myself to fit someone else's needs. My therapist asked me once, "Do you think Vanessa ever truly saw you?" Thought for a long time. Then I said, "I don't know, but I finally do." That was enough. What surprised me most during this time was how many people quietly came forward to say, "I've been through something similar." Friends I thought had perfect families shared stories of siblings who manipulated, borrowed, took, coworkers confided about loans gone unpaid, inheritances contested, toxic bonds they didn't know how to break. I realized I wasn't alone. And in that realization, I found strength. I started journaling again, not for anyone else, just me. Every entry was a declaration. I am worth protecting. I am not my sister's mistakes. One entry simply read, "I exist outside of her." That truth became a mantra. Whenever doubt crept in, that guilty voice whispering, "Maybe you went too far," I reminded myself, boundaries are not betrayal. Protecting yourself is not revenge. I also began speaking at financial literacy events, sharing anonymized parts of my story, how identity theft often comes from within, how women are taught to sacrifice, to forgive without question, to absorb pain as proof of loyalty. But I wasn't a sponge anymore. I was a sword. And slowly, people stopped looking at me with pity. They looked at me with respect. The final piece of healing came one Sunday morning. I was standing in the tiny kitchen of our apartment making pancakes with Ethan when I got a text. It was from Vanessa. It simply said, "I'm sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll find peace." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, "I have. I hope you do too." And I hit send. The moment I walked into that final mediation meeting, something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the same woman who had sat across from fraud investigators, trembling. I was calm, composed, my blazer crisp, documents neatly ordered in my bag. I wasn't here to plead. I was here to reclaim. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes late, flustered and defensive. Her lawyer tried to speak first, but Carla cut in smoothly, laying out the timeline of events. the damages, and the agreement she had violated by missing her first repayment deadline. "We are prepared to escalate," Carla said, her voice cool. Vanessa looked at me, eyes wide. "Liv, please, you know I'm trying." "No," I replied. "I know you're stalling. There's a difference." That was the first time I saw her realize I wasn't going to bend. Later that week, the news broke. A quiet article buried in the finance section of a local paper. Fraud settlement filed in high-value real estate case. No names, but just enough detail that her circle would recognize the story. Vanessa called me that night, panicked. Everyone's gonna know, they're gonna talk. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. "You should have thought about that when you signed my name." I hung up. But that wasn't the real comeback. The real one came 2 months later when I was invited to speak at a national conference on financial resilience. My story, anonymized but powerful, had reached an organization that wanted real stories of survival, of boundaries drawn, of lives rebuilt. I stood on stage in front of hundreds. I told them about identity theft, yes, but I also told them about love, how it can blind you, bind you, and break you, and how healing is never loud, but it's real. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, a young woman came up to me in tears. "You described my sister," she whispered. "You made me feel less alone." That's when I knew my story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the narrative. Vanessa had taken my name, but I had taken it back. With truth, with strength, and with the quiet power of someone who no longer had anything to prove. Because dignity doesn't scream, it stands. And I was finally standing tall. That wasn't the only way I reclaimed control. With the compensation from selling the house and clearing my name, I reinvested in myself. I enrolled in a certification course for financial ethics and compliance, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. It was intense, demanding, but it reminded me of who I really was, someone capable, disciplined, and sharp. And then came the offer. A well-regarded financial consultancy firm invited me to lead a new division focused on consumer fraud awareness and financial recovery. They had heard me speak at the conference and were impressed. For the first time in my life, I was being recognized not just for what I could endure, but for how I could lead. Accepting that role felt like reclaiming years of self-worth that had been quietly chipped away. Ethan threw me a celebration dinner with our closest friends. No flash, no extravagance. Just warmth, laughter, and a quiet toast in our tiny living room. "To Liv," he said, eyes gleaming, "for standing when it was hardest." I gave a speech of my own that night. Just a few words, but they mattered. I'm not defined by what was done to me. I'm defined by what I chose to do after. And I had chosen to rise. Vanessa, meanwhile, had to downsize everything. Her apartment, her wardrobe, her circle. Word had spread. Her social media slowly dried up. She'd started working retail to meet the terms of the restitution plan. Her Instagram bio now read, "Rebuilding, please be kind." I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. Because while she was still focused on appearances, I was focused on reality. Building something real with Ethan. Mentoring younger women in finance, using my voice to help others navigate betrayal and find their strength. Months later, I walked past a mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. She wasn't broken. She wasn't bitter. She was better. Not because she got revenge, but because she finally chose herself. The biggest moment came one afternoon when I was invited to be a guest speaker at my old university, Northwestern. The same halls where I'd studied, hustled, doubted myself. I stood at the front of a lecture hall, facing rows of students eager to learn about finance. But what I gave them was something else. "I want you to remember," I told them, "that no one, not even family, has the right to use your stability as their shortcut. Set your boundaries early and enforce them fiercely." The applause that followed wasn't the validation I'd once craved. It was confirmation that I'd turned the worst chapter of my life into something bigger. a caution, a compass, a legacy. Vanessa took something from me, but I turned it into power. That was my final revenge by never needing one. Vanessa's decline wasn't loud. It was slow, quiet, the kind that creeps into your life until you don't recognize it's happening, until you're already drowning. After the restitution agreement was signed, she tried to keep up appearances. She posted cryptic captions about starting over, tagged inspirational quotes, and smiled with tight-lipped restraint, but the shine had worn off. Her friends, once eager to sip wine on her marble countertops, stopped replying. The influencers she once envied now seemed galaxies away. Her husband filed for divorce 3 months after the scandal, citing irreconcilable differences. But everyone knew it was more than that. Andrew moved to Seattle, clean break. Vanessa stayed behind. She moved into a small apartment above a laundromat, took a retail job, folding clothes for minimum wage. No more catered parties, no more spa weekends. She applied for jobs in real estate again, but couldn't get a call back. Her name, once her currency, was now her sentence. She emailed me once asking for help navigating a background check rejection. I forwarded her to a legal resource. I didn't reply personally because helping her didn't mean rescuing her anymore. It meant stepping back, letting her live the consequences she'd worked so hard to avoid. My parents struggled with it. My mother cried after every call, still hoping Vanessa would come around. My father was quieter, hurt but resigned. She made her choices, he said one evening, shaking his head. Therapy helped them too. They stopped making excuses, started attending support groups for families dealing with intra-family abuse, because that's what it was, abuse, not physical, but emotional, financial. And finally, they saw it clearly. Vanessa's restitution payments were slow but steady. Court enforced now, automatic withdrawals from her paycheck every month. It would take years to repay what she owed, and not just in money, in trust, in peace. She was no longer the center of the story. She was the cautionary tale. One afternoon, I passed her on the street downtown. She didn't see me. She was sitting on a bench outside a grocery store, scrolling through her phone with earbuds in, dressed in a faded coat that used to be mine. Her hair was pulled back messily, her expression vacant. For a moment, I felt a pang, not of pity, but of recognition. That was the version of Vanessa I'd once tried to protect. The girl beneath the gloss. The sister I had imagined existed under all the damage. But then she laughed at something on her phone, completely unaware of my presence, and the moment passed. She wasn't my responsibility anymore. I didn't wave, I didn't stop, I just walked on. What stayed with me wasn't her fall, but how I felt walking past it, free, detached, not cold, not cruel, just clear. Sometimes letting go doesn't come with fireworks, it comes with silence and a calm heart. In the following months, Vanessa began attending mandated financial counseling. Her payments continued. She stayed out of further legal trouble, but she no longer had access to her parents' finances or anyone else's. The doors she'd once waltzed through without effort had closed. And she had to knock now if she wanted in anywhere. When our mother mentioned once that Vanessa had started volunteering at a youth shelter, I said nothing. It wasn't my business anymore. Growth, if it came, would be hers to own, not mine to validate. I didn't need closure, because she was living it. Every quiet day, every payment made, every time she answered, "I don't qualify" on a loan application. That was the price of her decisions, and I had no interest in collecting it. She was paying it herself. 18 months after the day I received that bank notification, my life looks nothing like it used to. And in so many ways, that's a blessing. The house Vanessa tried to steal is long gone, sold to repay the fraudulent debt. The remaining proceeds allowed Ethan and me to place a down payment on our first real home. Not a mansion, not a trophy, just a cozy place with sunlight in the kitchen and room for bookshelves. We painted the walls ourselves. My credit score has fully recovered, but more importantly, so has my sense of self. For too long, I believed that being a good sister meant swallowing pain without protest. That love meant forgiveness without consequence. That family meant loyalty at any cost. I don't believe that anymore. I believe in earned trust, in firm boundaries, and in the strength of saying no, even when it hurts, even when it shatters long-held illusions. My parents have changed too, slowly. They still love Vanessa, but they no longer excuse her. They acknowledge the damage she caused and their role in enabling it. Our family dinners are smaller now, but they're honest. No more pretending. Vanessa still lives in the city. We cross paths occasionally through updates from our parents. She's working, paying off her debts, trying, and I sincerely wish her well, but I don't wish for closeness. Some relationships don't heal. Some wounds don't scar neatly, and that's okay. Because healing isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It's about building something stronger in its place. Ethan and I are now engaged. He proposed on the anniversary of my quietest victory, the day I reclaimed my name. The ring isn't extravagant, but every time I look at it, I remember the journey. Every moment of doubt, every boundary set, every decision to choose myself. And I am proud, not for surviving, but for living better, with purpose, with courage, and without apology. I've also begun mentoring young women in finance, not just on budgeting and investments, but on boundaries, on speaking up when something feels wrong, on protecting not just your accounts, but your self-worth. Because betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it wears a familiar face and a warm smile. And the hardest part isn't the pain, it's the self-doubt that follows. Did I let this happen? Is it my fault? Could I have stopped it? The answer is no, and yes, and maybe, but what matters is what we do next. Now, I keep a framed copy of the first fraud alert letter on my desk, not as a wound, but as a reminder that even when your world is hijacked, you can take it back. Even when trust is broken, it can be rebuilt, brick by honest brick. Therapy helped me process more than just financial trauma. It helped me understand the emotional patterns that kept me tethered to someone who repeatedly hurt me. And it taught me something radical. You don't have to forgive to heal. You just have to let go. Let go of guilt, of expectations, of the fantasy that things would be different if only you loved hard enough. That was the real lesson. And now, standing in a home I chose, beside a partner who sees me fully, I can finally say, I am not the victim of this story. I am its author. And the next chapters, they are mine to write. If you're reading this, or listening, or watching, and you're dealing with betrayal, especially from someone close, I hope my story reminds you you are not alone. Your pain is valid, and recovery isn't just possible, it's powerful. The road back may be messy, full of doubt and detours, but each step you take to reclaim your boundaries, your truth, your dignity, that's you choosing yourself. And that's not selfish. That's survival. And maybe one day, like me, you'll wake up and realize that the worst thing that happened to you gave you exactly what you needed to become who you were meant to be. As a free